What we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to talk about the why of our vision. We're going to talk a little bit about the how, the fundamentals of it, and then we're going to talk about some practical tips for actually doing this idea of this one-on-one discipleship. And so my hope is that after having that conversation for a little bit, we'll be able to spend some time at the tables that we're sitting at. And as I'm looking around, I see at least one person at every table who has been a part of leading a group before. And so what we'll do is we'll spend a little bit of time just talking between each other what we've seen success in as far as living out this one-on-one relationship, this one-on-one ministry. And then at the very end, we'll open it up and have the time for some questions. So that's what it'll look like tonight. But let me give you a little bit of backstory. So I think a lot of you are familiar with this. Some of you may be unfamiliar with this story. But around the start of last year, in the fall, Carl brought forth this vision of saying, hey, we are going to pursue one. We're going to chase one. We're going to find someone out there in our group who's going to be the person we are going after. And that became a big part of our vision. And then in January, Tommy presented our new church vision, our new church mission statement, if you will. I think pretty much all of us have heard this, and that is that we are a growing family awakening to God and living on mission. And when Tommy presented that to us in January, he presented to us this idea that, hey, as a church, we are going to find one. We're going to find one person who we care deeply about and that we are going to love on and we are going to bring in. And ultimately, the goal is that that person joins the family of the church. And what's really great and what to me just says that is an affirmation of following the Holy Spirit and an affirmation of the direction that the leadership of the church is going is that Tommy and Carl didn't necessarily talk about that. Tommy and Carl didn't sit down and say, hey, you're trying to find a new vision for student ministry, and I'm trying to find a new vision for the church. Let's just go ahead and make these the same thing. But what I think happened is that I think that Carl and Tommy both spent time praying and saying, Lord, lead us in the direction that you want us to go and help us find our vision. And the good news about the Holy Spirit is that he knows what he's doing and God knows what he's doing. And so I think that he led Carl and Tommy to the same place. Which I think is really neat, and it tells me that our church as a whole is on the same board and we're caring about the same thing, which is important. And so we have arrived at our vision as a student ministry. We're looking at here on the board. And so let's look at this. What we're saying is we are going to first be available to all. When someone calls you up and says, hey, this is happening in my life, I need to talk to somebody about something. You're saying, hey, my phone, you have my number. It is not a bother to call me. You are not a problem in my life for reaching out. I want you to do those things. You are available to all of your group. Your group knows that they can come to you for the things that they need, that you are watching out and caring for them. But naturally, there's going to be some that we connect to a little bit more than others. I mean, whether it's a group of 10 people, if it's a room of this size, if it's a room the size that it was 15 minutes ago, you're naturally going to find some people that you're drawn to and that you grow closer with than others. And so we recognize that, and we're not telling you that that's a bad thing, that that's a wrong thing. We're not saying that you should shy away from that. Quite the opposite. The second phase of this vision is that, hey, you're available to all, but you should invest in the few. If we live out our side, if we make sure that you have a group of about 10 people and that there's 2 leaders, if each leader finds 3 or 4 people that they're connecting with and investing in, over half of your group, almost the entirety of your group has one of the 2 leaders who is really caring for them, is looking out for them. And so we want you to invest in a few and really be pouring in and making those relationships. But then at the very end, we want you to pursue one. We want you to find the one. We want you to find the person who you are going to chase after. We want you to find the person who you are going to bring along and say, hey, I want you to be a part of the family. And so this is our vision, that we're going to be available for all, we're going to invest in a few, and we're going to chase after the one. So why is this our vision? Why are we doing this? Let me take a second to sell you on the backside just a little bit. The first reason why I think that we're doing this, the first reason why I think it's important is that relationships need investment. At the end of the day, we could sit and we could look at it in the same way that you buy anything else. with physical currency. When you're trying to buy in a relationship, you're buying that with time. You're spending your time with someone. You're spending your energy, you're spending your emotion, and you're pouring that, you're giving that off to somebody else. If what we're doing is we are trying to model and lead students, we're trying to say, hey, we want you to grow up and living the best and most fulfilled life in your relationship with Christ that you can. I think that I have figured it out. I have looked at Jesus and I have tried to follow his example, and I'm going to model that and bring you along. If that's our end goal as a student ministry, and I think that it is, I think our end goal is to bring students along into a further and deeper relationship. The part of our job is investing. Part of our job is making these relationships. Part of our job is showing them what church is about. And that brings us to the second point, in that the church is family. The church is community. That the church, the benefit, the why of why we come here, the why of why we spend time every week together, the reason why we have community, why God calls us to do this all together, is because it's beneficial. The reason why we part of the reason why we put in this energy and this investment into our relationship with the Lord, and part of that other side of it is, hey, God's saying that, hey, you know what, you're going to get to walk with brothers and sisters in Christ. And a lot of times, I think when we hear brothers and sisters in Christ, I think what we're hearing the old church phrase. Oh yeah, there's Brother Jacob. There's Jane walking down the way. These are my brothers and sisters in Christ. Come on in, family of God. But are we really looking at it like a family? Are we really looking at our students and saying, hey, you know what? We are part of a family together now. You and I are living in a family. You and I are going to walk through the hard times. We're going to celebrate the good times. We're going to figure out the confusing times. We're in this together. We're a family. We are family in God, and so we're going to live like it. And by having these one-on-one relationships, by deeply investing in bringing someone else into your life and opening yourself in vulnerability and showing more about who you are, and allowing the student to share with you about who they are, what they care about, and the things that they're interested in, the questions that they have. That's bringing them into your family. The last reason why we think this is valuable is ultimately just this idea of the ripple in a pond, that they're going to spread and they're going to grow. It's kind of the same reason why we have the group mentality of Carl sitting back and saying, hey, I am one Carl, and there are 500 students. I cannot handle 500 people. What I can do is I can handle 80 leaders. Let me get 80 leaders who can split up 500 people. And what you're looking at and saying is, hey, I can't personally get 15 people to be invested in this thing like I am. But I can get one person, and one person can get one more person, and all of a sudden, after I've invested in this person for a year, and they've turned around and they've invested in someone else in our small group, and I found somebody else in our small group. My co-leader's been doing the same thing the whole time on the other side. And all of a sudden, after a little bit of effort and a little bit of investment, we're sitting at the end of it and we're saying, wow, our whole group has bought in on this idea. Our whole group is coming together and invested. Our whole group, by a process of just slowly spreading the love, by slowly bringing people into the fold, our whole group has now said, wow, I'm bought in, I'm a part of it. So I think those are three reasons why we have this vision. But it's time for us to do it. In a week, in 7 days, the rubber is hitting the road, students are showing up in this building. Fast forward 7 days from now, and you're walking to your small group room for the very first time of a new school year. So what are we to do? Well, first, let me just give you some foundational things to think about. Some foundational things to put down and remember as you're going through this process. The first is just to ask you, to remind you that this is a journey. These are people. They're not programs that operate a certain way. They're going to have the same thing every time when it goes through a function. They don't operate based on predictable logic that goes the same way every time. They're teenagers. They're the most unpredictable people in the world. They wake up and they don't know what they want. So for us to figure out what they want and what they need is an even harder task. And I say that as an encouragement for you. It may not necessarily sound like an encouragement. It may sound daunting, that they're confusing and messy and that you're diving in, and whatever kind of plans that you have, you might as well toss it out the window because plans just don't ever seem to work.
But I say this as an encouragement, because what I'm saying is, hey, it's okay when it doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go. Because no matter what you thought it wasn't going to go that way. And it's okay that it's taking you longer. It's okay that you were talking to another small group leader, and them and their one that they've been pursuing, that they're already like double dating, and they're going out all the time, they're hanging out every Friday night. It's okay. Because what you're doing is you're walking on a journey with your family, and you're experiencing real life together. And the thing is that if it all looked the same, it would all be a shade of gray, and it wouldn't be worth doing. It's good that we're different. It's going to be different for all of us, and that's okay. As we're entering into this, the next thing I'd remind you is that we're living out Jesus' model discipleship. Carl kind of hinted at this earlier when he was talking about it, but ultimately all we're doing is just modeling what Jesus did. And we're just the next person in a line of many, 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 many people that have been doing this for 2,000 some years. Of just trying to model best for the next generation of what Jesus and the leaders before them did. Jesus pulled 12 people alongside and said, hey, come live life with me. Walk with me, eat with me, sleep with me, pray with me, cry with me, laugh with me, be bored with me, be hot with me, be cold with me, be hungry with me, be full with me, be stinky with me. Jesus said, just come live your life with me. And I'm going to teach you things along the way. And he pulled people aside. We see time and time again. He calls out to Peter, and Peter on the boat, and he doesn't say, hey, whole group, come out here, party on the ocean. He says, Peter, come walk out to me. He calls out Peter individually. So we're ready to disciple, and the good news is that we don't have to try to come up with what this looks like. We don't have to make it up. We just have to look to the gospel, and we have to look at Jesus and say, hey, whatever he did, well, it's good enough for me if it's good enough for Jesus. I'm going to bring people along. I'm going to welcome them in my life. I'm going to love them. I'm going to care for them. And I'm going to do it in a way that says, hey, you have all of me, and I'm ready to have all of you, all the messiness, all the nastiness, whatever that is, we're in this together. A tip that I would give you is I would tell you to assess the group. I would say, hey, look at your group. This idea of finding the one, it's not necessarily about finding the one on the fringes that isn't coming frequently. It might be. That might truly be the person God's calling you to, and we should chase that person down. But when we're talking about this, when we're talking about finding your one that you're deeply pouring into and pursuing, you're probably finding the person in your small group who you're looking around and you're saying, hey, they carry some influence around here. If I come over here and I convince Kim to be 100% bought in, if I get Kim to be bought in with me, then I know that Heather and I know that Maddie are going to come along with Kim. I know that if I get Kim, I know Maddie and Heather are coming right along with them, that they're going to be bought into just because Kim is. So look at your group. See the people in your group who are influential and are going to help bring others along. Those that are going to help live out this ripple effect. And here in a couple years, we'll be saying, hey, you've already got most of your group. Let's go find the people on the outside and bring them in. But as we're just beginning this journey, let's look at our group. Let's find who the people are that we want to be bringing in to help bring the next round in with us. Another point that I would give you at the very beginning level is, hey, empower them. Let them help lead this. You're not walking through a program with them. What we said at the very beginning about this being a journey, the good news is without this being like a set black and white kind of thing, with this being very open and very much so a process of us feeling it out and individual based, there's no one way that you should be doing this. There's no one way to approach this. And there's no one way that you have to be leading them. You can say, hey, I want to get to know you better. What do you want to do? Hey, let's spend some time together. You pick what we're doing. Hey, I want you to have control in this, some control on this. Maybe with sixth graders, we give them a little less control than juniors in high school, but we still can hand over some control to them. We can empower them and raise them up, allow them to see that this is a 50-50% relationship. The last thing is I would tell you, hey, think about the age of your students. And in most ways, we split things up, middle school, high school. We talk about what the high school student needs, what the middle school student needs. But with this in particular, I would almost want to split this up as pre-driving and driving. The things that you'll have to do to engage and interact with a student that can't drive yet, the ways that you would engage and interact with a student who has the freedom of driving themselves around are two totally different things. And so while there's a lot of things that are similar in the way that you'll interact with them, be thinking about their age. Be thinking about how you're going to handle them being a little bit younger. You might have to be going to them. You might want to be contacting their parents first in the situation to help with planning or scheduling things out like that. There are some things that you'll have to be thinking about if you have a younger student, or some freedom that comes along with having an older student. Let's look at some practical tips together, a couple quick things that if we do these things, I think it will really help us in our quest to walk one-on-one with a student. So the first is bring your families together. If we're saying, hey, this is a church, we are a family, we want you to understand what it means, student, to be a part of the family of church. We want you to see what community is. We want you to see what it means to be vulnerable, to love one another. Well, part of that means that we exist as a family outside of these walls. We don't just come together on Sundays and care about each other on Sundays. It means that we live and interact away from here. And so, hey, maybe it means what this looks like is you go in and having a meal at their family's house. Maybe it means their family coming over having a meal at your house. Maybe as you grow further along, or some of you might be our parents and your own students here, and the leaders of your student and you end up going on a vacation together or something like that. Bring your families together. This year we're bringing an extra focus into partnering with parents, and partnering with parents means partnering with the family. And so I would really encourage us to put a family focus on our one-on-one relationships. One, because they're students and they can be unreliable with their scheduling and their commitments and things like that. It happens. And adults are a little bit better about keeping that on track and knowing what's going to be happening on a given day or a given time. But two, just because it's important. The family unit is for most everyone at this age the most important thing they have, and that doesn't really change. Our families are important. The next thing is to move at their pace. And this kind of goes along to the thought of the journey, but hey, it is okay if we're going a little bit slower. And it's okay if they want to dive right in. It might be a little uncomfortable for us if they're on the other end of the spectrum. If you go up and you say, hey, I'd love to get to know you a little bit more this year. Would you ever like to go out for ice cream? And they're like, yeah, I'd like to go out for ice cream. And then also I'd like to do spring break together. And then I'm curious, what are your thoughts about getting neighboring houses down the road? Would you be interested in being neighbors for maybe 15, 20 years? Would that be fun for you? They might be like that. They might want to dive in head first. They love the idea of you caring and investing in them. Just be willing to move at their pace. It shows that you care, that you are bought in for them, not just to check a box. The next thing is I would really encourage you to attend their events. If what they're doing with their time is what's important to them, and we say that you, student, are important to us, then caring about what's important to them would be important to us. So I really encourage you to attend their events. Ask what they're doing. Ask, the places. Hey, do you have a recital coming up? Hey, do you have a game coming up? Whatever it is, figure out the things that they're doing and try to go to those. This is really a good thing to do with anyone in your group, but especially those that you're really actively pursuing. Take a stake interest in what they're doing and the activities that they're happening in. My sister she sings in musicals, and I have to go to 4 or 5 musicals a year, and it's not my favorite thing in the world, but my sister is one of my favorite things in the world, and I care about her, and so if me being at her musical is special for her, then I'll be there, and I'll do that. And so I think the same thing kind of comes for our students and saying, hey, you're special and you're meaningful to me, well, let me show up to what's meaningful to you. We kind of mentioned this with bringing our families together, partner with their parents, and more so this comes back around to hey, students aren't always knowledgeable about their family schedule, and they're not always capable of bringing themselves to someplace. So you come along with a parent and say, hey, I'm your child's small group leader. I think they're really great. I am trying to make an effort to get to know everyone in our small group more. I'd love to go and have lunch with Andy. When is Andy free next? Can we set up a time to get lunch together? So partner with the parents, come alongside of them, and let them help you in this quest. And the parents want what's best for their kids. I know a lot of us in this room are parents, and you want what's best for your child. And I'm sure that you would be thrilled if you heard that your child's small group leader was taking such a large investment in your child. Almost in the last, or second to last here, join together with your partner every now and then. This is a one-on-one thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done alone at all times. This probably doesn't want to be your MO. This doesn't want to be your habit of always doing things 2 and 2, but doing it occasionally, it can be good. It can be good for your group. It can be good just for your camaraderie with your small group partner. It can be fun for the students. Just something to consider that occasionally doing something together. And then the last thing is just, hey, part of this is having fun. Part of this is living life and enjoying life and all the fun things in life. Part of this is having, your one come over to watch a movie sometime in your house, or having your one go meet you to get ice cream and handles one night. But this is also about growing their faith. This is also about modeling what it looks like to be a mature, grown Christian and what that looks like in a day-to-day life. So while you sometimes want to go out and catch a movie, go play putt-putt, whatever, invite them to a coffee shop to talk about some scripture that you just read. Find something to watch together on Right Now Media. There's so many different things that you can do to help show them that, hey, part of this faith that we're living out, part of this thing that we're growing in together, this walk with God that we have, part of this is us taking time to participate in it. Not just come on Sundays, not just be a part of Fathom groups on Sunday nights, not just come on Thursdays over the summers or go to a camp sometime throughout the year, but part of this is just every day, the people that you know, the people that you call your friends, that you care about, you meet up and you talk about faith, you talk about what you're learning, you talk about what's going on in your life and how God is intersecting with that. So I'd encourage you to help them grow in that too. Again, it might look different for a 7th grader compared to a senior, but ultimately, at its core, all of these things have a place in our walk of trying to find one-on-one time. What I'd love for us to do now, though, is I'd love for us to take about 5 minutes or so. Again, I see at least one person at every table that has, spent some time leading a group already. And so, for those of us that are new, or for those of us that maybe just struggle with this a little bit, I'd love for us to just take some time and returners at the table, talk about what you saw some success in spending one-on-one investment with your students. I'll pick back up the mic and we'll all come back together for some question time here in about, let's say 8 minutes at 7:25. We'll spend the last 5 minutes with questions. Thanks. Alrighty, let's bring it back together and use these last 5 minutes. I'd love to open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions about this topic of walking one-on-one with a student?
So with younger students, how does it fall under safe sanctuary if we want to have like one-on-one time with them? Because they can't drive, so.
Sure. So with younger students, the question was, with younger students, how do you handle safe sanctuary policy stuff? The answer to that would be that there's a little bit of a gray area because it's off campus. That being said, rules still apply in a lot of ways. The car is kind of a one-time where you're going to have any level of a problem with this, because you're going to go to a public place more likely than not, and so at that point being one-on-one isn't a problem because you're in public surrounded by eyes. My suggestion to you would be to use wisdom in that. I would suggest, if possible, try to have the student be dropped off and pick up, meet somewhere rather than you take them there. That eliminates the drive problems. The other option is have somebody else in the car. While you're going somewhere, you might be bringing 4 people to a location, but the 2 of you go off kind of on your own and do something. Those are just a couple ways around it. But by and large, that is something, safe sanctuary being, that is something that you'll need to think about because it doesn't necessarily stop you from doing anything, but it does create some logistical things to dance around, like driving and things like that. Good question. Anything else? Anything else that you'd like to talk about or ask about as it pertains to this topic of one-on-one relationships? Yes, I think if the parents have said, hey, yeah, I want you doing that and have given you the okay, I think that's all right. Yeah, yeah.
In the same vein of the safe sanctuary, so those of us that have older ones that maybe do drive already, I've heard it, not, I think you mentioned it, but others, that like right now media is a great tool, and say you want to invite them and participate in a series once a week, bi-weekly or whatnot, how would that work if your other leader's not involved? I mean, luckily my wife is joining now, and so we'll have two in the house, but, you know, is that, if she wasn't a leader, like within the ministry, just having her and my other children around, is that acceptable?
Yeah, she still is another adult, as another person, and just as long as people are around. Safe Sanctuary is designed to protect what's the right word? Designed to protect those that can't help themselves, but it's also designed to protect you. It's there to help you, and so in that way, I would just advise you to use common sense as it relates to Safe Sanctuary. The rule, most of those rules have to be worded a certain way for your protection and for legal contract type of stuff, but ultimately, those types of rules are saying, hey, just have somebody else around to where if it ever came into a he said, she said, you could have another grown adult to say, no, nothing happened, or this is what happened. So to answer your question specifically, yes, other family that's not involved with leading here would be fine to have around.
I mean, I thought that like a husband and wife didn't count as students.
Yes, when they're like in a husband and wife wouldn't count like being in the same room together as like the only two. Again, when you get off campus, it also gets into a little bit of a gray area of saying, hey, the parents gave you permission. We are two people who live in the community. This isn't necessarily a church-sponsored event. I'm spending time with you. Again, students come over to, I'll use Carl and Rachel as an example. Students are over at Carl and Rachel's house at times, and it's Carl and Rachel and a student there. And, as long, we feel comfortable as long as there's that third party. Again, it's not a formal sanctioned thing. You're spending time with people. At a certain level, you are just a human being that has the right and the ability to act as a normal human being. Just be smart about it. Well, I appreciate your time. If there's no other questions, if you do have a question and you want to just talk to me about it, feel free to come up and talk about it, email me, whatever works for you. But it's 7:30 and I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you for being here. Just a reminder of the other two breakouts if you'd like to stay.